Okay. What you also picked up today, and this is not like essay assignments that you're going to be working on, but I certainly want to make sure we're familiar with it, is I basically gave you the free response question packet that you would have received if you took the AP exam last year in 2019. You're already familiar with one of the questions, the one on the very back. We've already taken a look at because that talks about, what is overrated. If you take a look at the rhetorical, what's referred to as the synthesis question. For those of you who took AP US World History last year, or you're currently in APUSH or AP Euro, and if you're not in any of those, don't worry, you're perfectly fine. But if you have or are taking any of those classes, a lot of people look at this as being similar to a DBQ, document-based question. I wouldn't call it the same thing. I call them cousins as opposed to like siblings. A DBQ, document-based question, I feel like as a history student, part of your responsibility is to convey your knowledge about that document so far as time period, motive, all of those things. Some more background, context of the actual source. You're not really doing that with this. So you're still going to use sources for your argument, but it's not you proving what you know about all the sources. Also with the DBQ, and I don't remember what the number is, how many sources you have to use, but it's a significant number. Synthesis, it's always 3. You have to use at least 3 sources. You can use more if you want, but there's not like that underlying pressure to use more. Couple things over here where you take a look. Number 1, notice up here at the top, total time, 2 hours and 15 minutes. You could be going, Mr. Kane, you lied to me. Because you told me when I do my 3 essays, I have exactly 2 hours. Where's this 15 minutes coming from?
The generosity versus the 15 minutes.
Not the generosity of my heart, but like the generosity of like College Board, if you want to call that. I think that's actually an oxymoron. You do get 2 hours and 15 minutes. The history of those 2 hours and 15 minutes is it used to be you only had 2 hours. In 2007, they gave you 2 hours and 15 minutes. Not because scores were so bad, but because that's when the synthesis question started. So with the synthesis come documents. So they give you the extra 15 minutes so that you can read the documents without it taking away from your writing time. How lovely. All right, so that is nice of them. What is new, and this did not start until last year, is this little caveat down here at the bottom. Note, you may begin writing your response before the reading period is over. It used to be you have 15 minutes to read. You can make notes, but you're either reading or making notes. You're not writing your essay. So if Michael was done in 8 or 9 minutes, you were going to sit there twiddling your thumbs for 5 or 6 minutes, or drawing pictures that I would then see when I get your test booklet back, and then I could judge you based on it.
Oh, I'd get a 0 for my heart.
So now, instead of making you wait, you can start writing your response right away, which is kind of nice. I don't think you need to feel any pressure that, I have to start writing my response within the first 7 or 8 minutes. If you need the 15 minutes to read over it, read over it. But you at least know that if you do want to start writing, you can do so. And so those 2 hours that you have could turn into 2 hours and not 15, but maybe 5 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever. You can answer the questions in whatever order you want because you see all 3. So within those 15-minute reading period, say Gavin gets done with the sources in 10 minutes, before I start writing the synthesis, I'd take a look at the other 2 questions just so I know what I'm dealing with, and then I can decide what order I want to go in. Chances are, of however many of you are in the room, 100% will probably do the synthesis first, because we just go 1, 2, 3, or people want to get it out of the way because of the sources. But Morgan's shaking her head no, she wants to save it for later. She can absolutely go ahead and do that. Makes no difference, because you just indicate which question you're answering. Any questions with that? Also, for those of you who do DBQs or have done DBQs, the DBQ question was always worth more than those other responses. The synthesis, the rhetorical analysis, the DRQ all receive equal weight. So each essay makes up 18.333333% of your AP score, which means in total all 3 make up 55%. But it's not that you have to nail the synthesis or everything falls apart. They're all equal so far as the writing. Okay? The way synthesis question works is they kind of break it down into 3 parts. So what I would do is just kind of write over here in the margins next to it, that first paragraph, that first little part that they have, it's kind of like an intro. Just a little introduction. Lets you know what kind of issue, what kind of topic you're taking a look at. The middle one, where it says carefully, and we'll obviously read it, that is the big one. The middle one is the one that you definitely want to be careful to read, because that is the actual prompt. That's the task that is at hand. The third one is kind of like a little bit of reminders that lets you know what it is that you're supposed to do. I kind of think of that one as being, these are the rules. Don't break the rules. Make sure you cite your sources, all that kind of stuff. They used to designate what they were, and they would call one like directions, and they'd call the other one assignment, and then Ellie would get confused. Wait a minute, this one says directions, but this is my assignment. What's the difference? So I think they just kind of put it in this little natural progression. So that little intro. In response to our society's increasing demand for energy, large-scale power has drawn attention from governments and consumers as a potential alternative to traditional materials that fuel our power grids, such as coal, oil, natural gas, water, or even sources such as nuclear or solar power. Some of you who took the PSATs are now going, what's their thing with like wind energy and wind farms? Why are we talking about this all the time? But we can't have that conversation because that's illegal. You'll just never know, Tabitha. You'll never know. Yet, the establishment of large-scale commercial-grade wind farms is often the subject of controversy for a variety of reasons. I'm getting background, I'm getting info, they're not telling me what to do. Carefully read the following 6 sources. Sometimes you get 6, sometimes you get 7, sometimes you just cross them out, but you get 6 to 8. Now they're giving you 6, including the introductory information for each source. Then synthesize material from at least how many sources? 3 of the sources and incorporate it. I still can't do this right. Then incorporate it into a coherent, well-written essay. I keep waiting for the day that they say incorporate it into a mediocre or like poor essay, in which you develop your position on the most important factors that an individual or an agency should consider when deciding to establish a wind farm. So that's what your prompt is. Couple things. It always says 3 sources. So whether you got 6, whether you got 7, whether you got 8, they always want at least 3 sources. You can use more than 3. If Vanessa uses 3 and Mira uses 5, your essay is not automatically better. Vanessa's isn't automatically worse. All right. If you don't use 3, meaning you use 2, per the rubric that goes with the synthesis, which looks just like the normal ones, you know, the evidence and commentary and sophistication. Per the rubric, if you use 2 sources or less, you can't get above a 1 in that evidence and commentary. So Ruby uses 2 sources. Her essay score is going to be terrible. At best, it's a 2, meaning like you get a point for your thesis, you get that 1 point in evidence. I can't imagine if you get 1 point in evidence, they're going to reward you for sophisticated writing style. It's just, I can't see that thing happening. So that would be, you know, shooting yourself in the foot. So you do want to make sure you use those 3 sources, which I don't think is really going to be all that bad. Anything about the argument part, or I should say at least the prompt as to what is it you're supposed to do, you find weird, interesting, good, bad?
So it says individual or agency. Is that like clumped together, or do you pick one?
You could do both. You could, you know, yes and yes. You could look at it solely as an individual, you know, if an individual homeowner. If you wanted to look at a big corporation, you could. If you were going back and forth, I don't think that would be a problem. They're not going to look at, I mean, if you say one in your thesis, I would pick to that one, but you could go with both and that would be okay. Good question.
So the prompt isn't asking if you should establish a wind farm, it's asking what important factors should be considered.
Correct. And I think that's where some folks kind of start to make this more difficult than it should be. And then other people go, like you, why should I write about that? No offense. Number 1, don't fight the prompt. So don't turn it into something that it's not. So it's not that you're going to write about this is why you should have a wind farm or this is why you should not. That really doesn't matter. There is a decent chance, based on the way you present information, that we could kind of get a sense as to if Susanna thinks it's a good idea or not, but she has zero responsibility to explain this is why you should or should not do it. Her responsibility, and it is still an argument, her responsibility is if you're thinking about it, this is what you need to consider. And it's not only this is what you need to consider, but this is why those factors should be considered. And so that's kind of more of, like the commentary part where we say generate commentary, it's going to boil down to, okay, why should this be a factor? But you don't have the responsibility of going, therefore, this is a great idea or a terrible idea. If that naturally comes across, that's not problematic, but the main thing is what are those factors that you are looking at? So the hope would be if I was putting together a thesis statement, rather than worrying about as an individual or an agency, and you certainly could mention, I'm not trying to discount, what Anastasia was asking about, but I want to know what those factors are. And I would think for most people it'll probably be 2 or 3 factors, and then you would make sure that you address those factors.
So in your thesis, you should say what they are and why they're important in that sense.
I would keep it at the what they are. When considering, constructing a wind farm, companies and individuals must consider blah, blah, blah. And then in those body paragraphs, you'll get into the why.
It says like your position on them. So like you said not to say like why it's good and why it's like a bad kind of thing. But so you're saying your position on like why people would regard it as important or like something they care about?
Why? Well, it literally is going to be what's your position on which factors are most important. Okay? So, for example, and let's take a roundabout way to answering this, without worrying about what any of the sources say, because the most important source is, in this case, source G. Anyone know source G?
You.
It's your brain. Yeah, it's you. Okay? You're a G.
Oh my god.
I've been waiting all day to say that. I just thought of that now.
Thanks, dog.
Don't ever say that to me.
I call you dog now.
Who do you think you are, Luke Holbert?
You didn't say
Oh
that
my
to
gosh.
me.
He called you dog?
Once.
No, Luke.
Why do you call you that, bro?
Can you think of a factor that you think someone should consider?
Economics, like money.
Okay, literally the cost of it?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a pretty legitimate one. So I'm just making little notes. One thing could be the cost. Cost to build it, cost to maintain it, whatever the case may be. What would be other factors?
Takes up space.
Okay, so the land.
Land area.
And the nice thing is if we say land, we can do multiple things with it, where if we say space, you're kind of literally limited to the space. So land. Off of there, I can put space. I could put, the feasibility of the land. Some land is going to be better than other parts of land. Anything else?
Construction, like bringing in,
Like what?
like bringing in.
Okay. So, no, and I could kind of go with the feasibility, but is it is it doable for this particular place? What are literally the logistics with it?
Like people, for like the construction.
I can't do this on my own.
Yeah, like how is it gonna get to houses or whatever?
Wherever you want that power to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of goes with money, but is it worth it?
What's the overall goal?
Yeah,
Am I putting a turbine in my backyard so I can have a backup power source when my electric goes out from the power grid?
There's a tornado.
Or am I trying to do the whole neighborhood? Do I live in Tornado Alley? Literally, in parts of the Midwest, that might not be a good place to have it.
It's easy energy, bro.
Is there, as stupid as this sounds, what's really the first thing that you want to make sure that's going to work about your location?
is it windy?
Is it windy? I mean, and that sounds silly, but there are some places that are windier than others. Stand on the hilltop up here, stand over at Westview, there's definitely difference so far as the way that the wind is going to work. So part of those logistics, could kind of be, is it windy?
I'd say like environmental benefits, like
Or drawbacks,
yeah.
kind of dependent what's going. I think we do think definitely of benefits environmentally because it's a renewable resource, but there certainly could also be some drawbacks that would take place.
It's ecologically footprint.
Ecologically friendly.
That sounds like a environmental science type thing that like Ruby should be saying.
Why?
So,
That's why I'm in
if
honors
we
environmental
talk like this,
science.
And we pull on knowledge that we gain from like other classes and things like that.
Oh, you're going for it.
Okay, so we can do it.
Yes, and that's what honestly, because this was last year's question, I find to be kind of odd, because no offense, it seems really geared towards environmental science students. And the ones that took it were like, this was the best synthesis question ever, and others were like, yeah, it was okay. Normally, and this kind of goes against what I say, normally I feel like they choose topics that doesn't really benefit anyone and that you probably haven't thought of. There have been questions about how would you fix the post office, or should it be eliminated? There have been things about what should be considered for artifacts before they go into the museum. Should we eliminate the penny? How come? Well, and I think the idea is they want it to be something that you'd not necessarily thought about in another course, but this one kind of goes against that. You know, daylight savings time, should we keep it? The nice thing is you always have sources to back you up. But the hope is, and you said in honors with the ecological footprint and all that stuff.
That is.
Anastasia, are you in any kind of environmental science class?
I'm in regular environmental.
Just regular?
Yeah,
Well, even in that
So,
regular
my
curriculum,
schedule.
you knew money was gonna be an issue. So we can still come up with our own stuff, but the sources are meant there to help you. But if you can bring in your own things to complement it, that's ideal. Because what does it mean to synthesize? Create, make, build. I'd add one other word that I think kind of helps for us, and that would be to blend, where I'm blending in the source material with my own ideas that I can bring to it. Now, Anastasia, going back to your question about you develop your position. So what your position is identifying, we came up with like bare minimum 5 topics, but depending upon what you're doing with feasibility, space, and all that kind of stuff, it could be more. So you're developing which of these you think is the most important. So where again, going back up here, your position on the most important factors, your decision, your call is, well, this is why money is the most important one, or the ecological footprint is the most important
taking,
one.
like, all of the ones you kind of pick us on from and saying like this is the most important.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the one that has to be considered above all else.
Okay, so this is stupid, but like, let's say we get something like this and already, right? I'm like, oh, apes, I got this, but then I write something that's like completely wrong. Would they, like, you know what I mean? Like, I write something that's just like completely wrong. Would they be like, sorry, but this is not valid, or like, what would happen?
If you make an honest mistake, like, say someone goes that World War II came to a close in 1964, like you literally flipped the 4 and the 6, instead of going 46, you wrote 64. As long as everything else is in line, you're probably okay. I mean, if you're making stuff up, I think they'll be able to read in between the line and figure that out. The only danger could be that if you are bringing something up and you, for whatever reason, didn't realize it was in the sources, and you're basically misusing that information, then they could go, you're misusing the source. But I think the chances of something like that are probably pretty minuscule. I mean, if it's an honest mistake that you made, as opposed to I'm going to try to like just make lies, you're probably okay. The overrated prompt. Student last year wrote how sleep is overrated. She didn't mean it. It was satirical in nature. It's a risk because, do they realize that you're doing this as a satire, or are they going to go, whoa, this doesn't make any sense? Based on her AP score, it must have worked, because she did okay. So they should be able to pick up on what's an honest mistake versus where is this girl getting, or guy, whomever, writer, getting this stuff from.
Okay, so like, I'm still kind of like confused. So you're saying your position on the important factors, so whenever you're talking about in your essays, you'll be like the cost, and then you'll be like, you don't want to make it too much or like not enough profit. Like, is that what you're saying? Or you're saying more like, oh, like you have to consider
So,
the profit?
and we haven't looked at the sources yet. I think the sources kind of help with this. Let's say that I'm going to go with money and land, just because they're my first 2 things. So in my argument, I'm going to be explaining why if you don't consider the overall cost, this isn't going to work. If you don't consider where you're putting the turbine, this isn't going to work. It's not that I'm saying these things don't matter, but it's me establishing this is why I feel that these are the 2 primary factors that someone should consider. chances are you're going to do 2 or 3. I mean, there's no way you're going to do this whole list because you're just not going to be able to have enough time to develop it. If you do, then you probably didn't answer the other 2 questions. But it's basically you validating why you have to think of money. So, you know, it would be like you come, Mr. Kane, I'm thinking of going to, you know, I don't know, Allegheny College. Do you know how much it costs to go there, Ellie? It's really expensive. Do you know how much money you're going to make with your degree upon spending? Let's be honest, it's going to be at least 5 years, not 4. No one really graduates in 4. Can you pay those? So I'm talking to you about finances just to make sure you've, you know, considered that.
Yeah.
Do you really want to live north of Edinburgh? Do you know how much snow they get up there? So now we're talking about weather, location. So it's that kind of thing. So it's more, it seems more informative than arguing that this is why you should not go to that school. But it's before you make a decision, you really have to consider these factors, and here's why. And so that's where it's going to be a blend of the source and your own ideas.
So the sources are our evidence. Do we need to, should we analyze?
I thought you said our enemies. Like, no, they're your friends.
Like, should we analyze the evidence before we use it as evidence? Or
Well,
should we just evidence?
So let's take a look at the first piece of evidence, okay? So, mention that. The last paragraph, your argument should be the focus of your essay. So you don't want to summarize the sources. You want to make sure that whatever, you know, Annalise is thinking, this is why it's a factor, you focus on that. Use the sources to develop your argument and explain the reasoning for it. Avoid merely summarizing. Indicate clearly which sources you're drawing from, whether through direct quotation, paraphrase, or summary. You can't quote a picture, but you can do some explanation. You can cite the sources as source A, source B, or by using the descriptions in parentheses. I know you didn't mean this, but literally you would go in parentheses, source A or photo. And that's how they know you're using it.
And you'd be like,
In the source, but that doesn't discredit it as having any value because Ruby's bringing in that environmental science background. Sorry, that AP environmental science background, not that honors or regular stuff.
Academic.
Here's our first source. It's a picture.
Do you need it like?
I love the pictures.
Wow.
You're always going to get at least one visual source. Here you have 2. You have the picture and then you have the chart, which I think is source F.
What do I do with this?
I like the picture sources. Some people don't. Number 1, you have to use 3 sources. Doesn't matter which 3 you use. They're all valid. So if Anastasia is going, I'm going to use both pictures.
what do you cite a
Fine.
photo?
That's what I'm thinking.
Ooh, good question. 'Cause yes. In the photo, so like literally, based on the things that we were mentioning, the factors, what could I pull from here?
We need a lot of space.
I need a ton of space
And a lot of wind turbines.
because
That's what I'm
how tall are these turbines?
Massive.
Like 450.
I've seen one. They're huge.
They're big.
Really?
450 sounds really,
That's
I was going to say 50 feet, but I don't know.
No, they're way more than 50 feet.
Way more than 50?
They're at
Okay.
least
We're not
200.
looking up.
All right.
They're at least 200, 300.
Probably.
Let's say 100 just for a nice even, you know, simple number. 100 feet tall. So based, you know, not to get you,
328.
328.
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Exactly.
It says 400 in here. It says exceeds 400.
Does it say? Okay.
Dude, the iPad says
Call me an AP environmental science.
So if I'm going 400 feet this way, what am I also doing?
And you're going with too.
Like, I really need
You need space.
800 feet in between. How many turbines are in this picture? I have no idea, but there's a ton. All right, there's at least 5. There's several hundred that are going on here. So this is a ton of land. We see turbines. If you go Somerset off the turnpike, you can see a couple. It looks like there's only like 5 or 6. You get off the exit, there's easily 50. Like they turn into all over the place, and they do tower above the trees. So you know they certainly are quite tall. So I need a ton of space. I need a ton of money, you know, to build all of these things that are going to be there. Not that that these would be gone the wrong way, but what if the wind goes the wrong direction? Like the wind's going this way instead of going, or actually I would want to go that way because that's going to help spin it. You know, if they're facing the wrong direction, or what do they tend to do? You have some facing one way, some facing the other. They have the ability to kind of rotate to follow the wind patterns depending what's going on. If I have one turbine in my backyard that's only facing one direction, I'm not going to get a whole lot coming from it. What do you tend to get around mountains?
Winds.
Wind, but also other factors, how's it going to work with snow, ice, things of that nature. Some people would go from that ecological footprint, I might have to cut down.
Trees.
Here I probably didn't have to. But what do you notice about the land?
Flat.
Arid.
It's,
Destroying habitat.
so I could be destroying habitats. If it's arid land and I'm digging into the ground and there's not water in a root system to maintain it, I could be dealing with erosion, kind of issues. So, I could simply be writing about by having a sheer number of hundreds of turbines and destroying or harming animals' natural habitat photo, I'm utilizing the source. I'm not summarizing the photo. If you go in the photo, there's a lot of turbines, and they're all very tall. By the mountains, you're not generating commentary. But if I am using this to explain, assume that one turbine is going to cost, again, a round number, say $10,000, multiply that by 100, now you got a lot of money that's being shelled out because you're up to $1 million at that point. So that's stuff that can get generated just from the photo. But literally you go in the photo or have your commentary, then go photo. Just because I use one source in one paragraph doesn't mean that every body paragraph has to then have that one source. If Mira has two sources in her first body paragraph, she doesn't have to have two in every single body paragraph. You just have to have a total of 3. So you could have a body paragraph that doesn't have any sources because I might come up with a factor that is not. We don't judge. Actually, we do, but the second source, and I know we're running here a little bit low on time. What's nice about the second source, couple things. One, never worry about where it's coming from. So don't go, ooh, it's online source. It's not any good. Sometimes they'll have blogs. That's fine. I like the website science.howstuffworks.com. I think that's a nice.
Will they ever
Gets the
source
point down.
Wikipedia?
I don't ever recall Wikipedia. They will sometimes have general reference, like an excerpt from an encyclopedia. I don't recall Wikipedia, but I don't want to say no, they haven't ever done it. But you do not get judged based on which source you choose. So say you do take a blog, which is provided, they're not going to go, oh, Morgan, you chose the wrong one. Ellie has the right source because she took the personal letter or whatnot. Or no, you shouldn't use a personal letter. That's too subjective. It must be objective. If they give you the source, it's a valuable, credible source that can get used. What's nice about source B is it gives you things that are a definite positive for it. Over here, it's cheaper. Other types of electricity can be cheaper, such as coal, but what's good about it? It's clean, it's renewable, you're not really in any danger of running out of wind. But there are downsides to it as well. They tend to give you at least one source that'll kind of have some, I don't want to say pro and con, but gives you a pretty unbiased overview. So that if it is something that you really don't know about, as Anna Cecilia, you were kind of worried about that. I haven't never thought about this before. If it were some, kind of strange topic, they'll give you enough stuff that you can formulate an idea about it, and so that you can at least be fairly educated. So that if you're not Ruby, you still have that background coming in. But she's going to misuse that information anyway. Now, notice, letter from Birmingham Jail says source B. Civil disobedience says source A. Next week you're going to get source C. Not that we're going to be writing about Thoreau and wind turbines, although that'd be one interesting essay. But we know that's a writing assignment that will be eventually coming down the road.
Why did you give us sources that are so long? They would never give us this one.
You're absolutely right.
Read that
They-
15 minutes for a try.
Analysis question, also on that back piece of paper, but on the other side, you'll see that that one is a letter from Gandhi, taking a look at, okay, how does he use rhetorical choices to present his case to Lord Irwin? But, you know, it looks the way a rhetorical analysis would, double column passage, you know, and then analyzing the rhetoric. You get all the questions at one chunk. The first question, and it's always the first question, but we've never discussed it